Let me start the review by saying I really like this movie. I might even go as far to say that I like it as much as the first two. Now, before you start disagreeing with me, hear me out. It is kind of hard to defend, given its controversial nature. Most die-hard Alien fans treat this as the black sheep of the franchise. Some forget it even happened. It cheats fans of Aliens out of some great characters, and it reverts back to the gritty, isolated feeling of the first film, taking the series back rather than forward. Reputedly, the film's director, David Fincher, and the studio execs couldn't see eye to eye on what the final film should be. It would have been interesting to see how Fincher's vision for the film would have turned out. As it stands, Alien 3 simply suffers from too much compromise from both parties, and even when watching the extended DVD edition, it isn't much closer to the movie Fincher intended to make. For that reason, Fincher refused to comment on the DVD during its release. It simply wasn't his film. Now that I've gotten the history out of the way, I'll start by saying Alien 3 is an acquired taste. I believe this was the first R-rated movie I got to see in theaters. As I've mentioned in the past, I was allowed to see R-rated movies provided I was with an adult. I was 9 when I went to see it, and excited as hell just to be able to be let in the theater at that age. I hadn't seen the earlier films, let alone even heard about them, so I had no idea what I was in for. I vaguely remember some of the scenes by themselves, but by the time it ended, I had no idea what happened. The only part that truly stands out is that haunting image of Ripley throwing herself into the lava as the Queen Alien burst from her chest, stopping the company from obtaining the creature they've tried so hard to get their hands on. It would be several years before I gave the Alien films a run for my money, and several more before I truly started to appreciate them. Up until I was a senior in high school, I favored movies that were fast-paced, constantly moving. So movies that moved at a snail-like pace, like the first Alien, just weren't interesting to me. That was until I started to have a broader appreciation for film as a medium, and that was when I started watching everything I could. And even then, after seeing the first two Alien films, the third one, like with the majority of others, left a bad taste in my mouth. It was so drastically different from the last one, and seemed to lack energy. It tried to make connections with the last film, but it cut so many of its ties with that movie that it probably should have been a standalone film. For example, and this is a spoiler, but it occurs within the first 10 minutes, when Ripley crashes onto the prison planet, Newt and Hicks are killed. We just spent an entire movie getting to know and like these major characters, and they go ahead and kill them off in as thoughtless a way as they could. Not only that, but there's a scene where Ripley requests an autopsy of Newt, who drowned on collision, so she can see if an alien is inside of her. This is basically the film's way of casting this character aside like yesterday's out-of-work actors. And we don't even see the Hicks character, he's just simply dead on arrival. What we do find out is that during their slumber in space, a facehugger snuck aboard their craft and impregnated Ripley with a queen specimen. This sets up the dilemma of the film. Ripley wants them to freeze her and extract the alien before the company becomes aware of her location. It's even more desperate given it's a queen because it has the ability to lay more eggs and start everything over again. The facehugger also manages to impregnate a dog. The creature bursts through the dog's chest, and because of this, we get a new form of the alien that has dog-like movements, like the ability to walk on all fours. It's an interesting notion, and it's the first time we're given the significance of the name xenomorph. Now, in the extended DVD version, this is slightly altered, as the facehugger lays an egg in the carcass of a cow or a bull. This makes no sense, because the animal is dead when the creature hatches, and it also doesn't explain why the alien is able to move like it does. For whatever reason, cows just don't strike me as threatening. The prisoners on the planet have taken up religion, which is the film's main departure from the first two films. The religious undercurrent is unsettling and doesn't really fit given the nature of the first two movies.
Do you have any faith, sister?
Not much.
Well, we've got a lot of faith here. Enough even for you.
This, more than anything else, is what makes Alien 3 stand apart from its predecessors. The inmates on the planet haven't been exposed to a woman in a fairly long time, so as soon as Ripley makes her presence known, the prison warden is immediately concerned for her safety amongst the convicts. There's even a disturbing scene where Ripley is beaten and nearly raped by some of the inmates, and is rescued by a man who has by this time clearly stated his hatred for her.
My friends would have appreciated.
Yeah, well, you don't want to know me, lady. I'm a murderer and rapist of women.
They tend to warm up to her, however, when the alien gets loose, and she seems to be the only one who knows how to kill it. There's also an interesting romance between Ripley and a doctor, another inmate named Clemens, who reveals that he accidentally gave a bunch of children the wrong dosage of medications, killing them. He does this as a result of getting drunk, but still, it's a pretty brutal crime, and we wonder, despite his apparent compassion toward Ripley, what she sees in him. There's also an interesting dynamic between the alien and Ripley. When they finally meet face to face, the alien refuses to kill her because it senses that Ripley carries its future. Ripley uses this to come up with a plan to ensnare the alien. And the last part of the film is just that, getting the inmates to trap the beast in a secluded area where they can destroy it before the company arrives. This is undeniably the best part of the whole film, up until the ending, which is weird, but also a bit profound. Since Clemens is dead, there's no one who can perform the operation on Ripley, and she runs out of time when the company comes to claim their prize. One of the people who greets Ripley is a man who resembles Bishop from Aliens. At first, Bishop claims to be a real person, the actual man that Bishop was modeled after. But in a last-ditch effort to restrain Ripley, she realizes it was all a clever trap by the company to keep her from doing anything stupid. And in a final, mesmerizing image, Ripley leaps to her death for the good of mankind. To me, this is the most profound part of the entire series, and is where the franchise should have ended. The last piece of dialogue is actually a recorded voiceover from the end of Alien, where Ripley talks about the remains of her original crew.
With a little luck, the network picked me up. This is Ripley, last survivor of the Nostromo. Signing off.
This is one movie you have to let sink in, especially after the roller coaster ride nature of Aliens. It's a thinking man's movie, a little sentimental at times, and very different in its pace and its tone. It's nothing like what fans were expecting, and maybe that's why it gets such a bad rap. Watching the film isn't the joyride that we experienced with Aliens, but it's a different kind of feeling that feels almost as gratifying. The characters definitely aren't as memorable, and some of the dialogue is just ridiculous. But is it a weak point in the series? That's a hard one for me, and an even harder movie to defend because it's so different. But I stand behind my opinion. Like Aliens, it's an easy film to talk about, provided you've seen it enough times and you know about its questionable history. It has a few hiccups, but it still has that alien feel to it, and I'll pop this one in any day.
We commit this child. Ripley!
It's here! You got Clemens!
Stop this raving at once!
I'm
Stop
telling you! It's here!
There and get that foolish woman back to the infirmary!